I should have known better than to go through the old corn maze on Halloween night, but peer pressure got the best of me. My friends dared me, and there was no way I'd let them say I was too scared. It was a small town thing. The corn maze opened every Halloween, free but supposedly haunted. The only rule was that you had to go through alone. I had heard all the urban legends about people going in and never coming out, or coming back out. Different. I tried to laugh it off as I walked up to the entrance, a flashlight clenched in my hand and my breath already fogging in the chilly night air. The tall corn stalks, dark and twisted, loomed over me, swaying in the breeze. The path ahead looked endless, stretching out like a black, empty tunnel. After a few minutes, though, the silence grew oppressive. The only sounds were my own footsteps and the occasional snap of a corn stalk. I felt my heartbeat quicken and sped up, but the path twisted and wound in odd ways. Twice, I had to double back when I hit dead ends. Each turn seemed to make the maze feel more closed in, like the rows were tightening around me. And that's when the whispers started. It began softly, like a hushed breeze, but the sound grew. I couldn't make out words, only a faint murmur, like someone was right beside me, mumbling just beyond my hearing. I stopped and strained to listen, but it was gone, replaced by the sound of footsteps behind me. My heart leapt into my throat. I turned, flashing the light into the rows behind me. Empty. Just endless stalks of corn. I told myself it was the wind or maybe one of my friends sneaking up on me as a prank. But deep down, I felt something else. Something wrong. I kept walking, a little faster now, casting glances over my shoulder every few seconds. The whispers returned, louder this time, and the footsteps grew more distinct, like someone was pacing just behind me, matching my speed. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was just out of sight, following me. Then, as I rounded another bend, I saw something that made me freeze. On the ground was a crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up, and my blood ran cold. It was a photograph of me, taken tonight, from behind. My friends hadn't taken it. I'd walked ahead of them straight to the maze entrance. So, who had taken this photo? The whispers grew louder, echoing my name this time, chilling and clear. I stumbled backward, staring at the shadows between the stalks. My flashlight shook in my hand as I pointed it around me, desperate to find an exit. But every path looked the same, like the maze itself had changed, winding me deeper into a trap. I started running, but it only got worse. The footsteps behind me matched my every step, faster and closer with each turn. My breathing turned ragged, and my lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. The whispers now were mocking, repeating my name, twisted and echoing like multiple voices all saying it at once, with a sickening, drawn-out laughter that left my skin prickling. Then, in a final desperate moment, I rounded one last corner, panting and trembling, only to stop dead in my tracks. There, in the flickering beam of my flashlight, was a face peering at me from between the stalks. But it wasn't just any face, it was my face. The eyes were dark, hollow, and gleaming with a sick sort of amusement. The mouth twisted into a grin, one far wider than any human face should be able to make. It whispered, "You're already lost," and as it said those words, its mouth opened wider, stretching and cracking as it spoke, the voice deep and layered, like a dozen versions of myself speaking at once. I backed away, stumbling, my flashlight dropping from my grip and clattering to the ground. The whispers grew louder, swelling around me until they were deafening. I could barely hear my own heartbeat over the sound. I turned to run, but every direction looked the same, a never-ending path of tall, suffocating corn stalks, twisting and looping, leading me back to that same dark face watching me. I don't know how long I wandered after that. The whispers stayed with me, mocking and cold, growing louder whenever I thought I was getting close to the exit. Hours felt like minutes, and every turn, every step, only led me deeper, my own footsteps echoing back at me. And then, as suddenly as it had all started, I stumbled out, tripping and collapsing onto the cold, wet ground outside the maze. My friends were there, laughing and talking, as if I'd only been gone a few minutes. I looked back at the entrance of the maze, but the face was gone, the whispers silent. I haven't gone back since that night. But sometimes, when I'm alone and it's quiet, I swear I can still hear them. The whispers, calling my name. Last Halloween, I was home alone, scrolling through my phone, killing time while the trick-or-treaters finished up outside. I was feeling nostalgic and decided to flip through my old Halloween photos. For the past 5 years, my friends and I had made it a tradition to dress up, hit a few haunted houses, and take group photos to capture the night. It was always the highlight of the season, and those photos held some of my best memories. But as I scrolled back to last year's pictures, something caught my eye. There, in one of the photos, was a figure in the background. My friends and I were laughing, arms around each other, our costumes ridiculous, but behind us, barely visible in the dim light, was a tall, shadowy figure. He wore a long, dark coat, and his face was obscured, maybe a mask, or perhaps the shadows were playing tricks on me. I squinted, trying to remember if anyone in costume had been near us that night, but nothing came to mind. At first, I laughed it off, figuring it was just some random photobomber. But something about it felt off. My curiosity got the better of me, and I started going through all my Halloween photos, one by one. Each year, the same friends, the same laughter, but as I looked closer, I felt a creeping chill. In every single picture from the past 5 years, the figure was there. Always in the background, never facing the camera directly, but unmistakable. A dark figure in that same long coat, standing at the same distance, watching. He was subtle, easy to miss unless you were looking for him. But now that I'd noticed, I couldn't unsee him. I felt my stomach twist, cold dread seeping into me. How could I have missed this for 5 years? I couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than just some random photobomber. Each year, he looked identical, same height, same stance, and that same unnerving mask, or lack of a face, hidden in the shadows. My heart pounded as I wondered, had he been following us all this time? I called my friends, one by one, to ask if they remembered seeing anyone like that on Halloween. They all said the same thing, they had no idea who he could be. A few of them laughed it off, saying it was probably some kid playing a prank or someone at the parties we'd been to. But their reassurances didn't sit right with me. Then, 2 nights ago, while I was going through my phone again, I received a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was spam, but when I opened it, there was an attachment, a photo of me, sitting at my desk in my bedroom. My stomach dropped. I hadn't taken it, and I'd been alone all evening. My hands shook as I studied the photo. I was there, oblivious, scrolling through my phone, but what chilled me to the core was what was behind me. In the shadows of my own bedroom, partially hidden but unmistakable, was the same figure, the man in the dark coat. This time, he was closer than ever, watching me from only a few feet away. My heart hammered in my chest, my mind reeling. I glanced over my shoulder, but my room was empty. Then, as I was trying to wrap my head around what I'd just seen, a new message came through. I've always been here, just waiting for you to see me. Every hair on my body stood on end. I felt trapped in my own room, like he could be watching me from the shadows at any moment. I locked my doors, double-checked the windows, and tried to calm myself down. I wanted to convince myself that it was just some elaborate prank, maybe someone hacked my phone, or one of my friends was messing with me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a joke. This figure had been there for years, waiting, watching. I had proof right there on my phone. The rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound made me jump, my mind playing tricks, making me think I saw shadows moving across my walls. I checked my phone obsessively, but no new messages came. Just the photo, staring back at me every time I looked. Since that night, I've tried to keep my phone out of sight, hoping that somehow it will make it stop. But part of me knows it won't. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I think I see him standing there in my peripheral vision, just for a second before he fades back into the shadows. Halloween used to be my favorite time of year. Now, I dread it, knowing he's out there, lurking, waiting for me to see him again. Halloween was just around the corner, and I was searching for something unique to complete my costume. I didn't want the usual plastic mask or cheap face paint. I wanted something with character, something unsettling. That's how I found myself in a tiny antique shop on the edge of town, a place I'd never noticed before. It smelled like dust and age, and the faint, eerie chime of an old clock echoed as I stepped inside. I sifted through racks of faded costumes and chipped trinkets, almost ready to give up, when something caught my eye. At the bottom of a cluttered box, partially covered by fraying clothes, lay a mask unlike any I'd ever seen. Its surface was cracked and worn, with a twisted smile painted in a dark, sickly red, like dried blood. The expression was both mocking and cruel, the eyes wide and lifeless. Curious, I picked it up, and as I did, the shop owner, a frail, wrinkled woman, appeared behind me, her eyes narrowing at the mask in my hands. "That mask has a history," she murmured. "It was left here by a man who wore it for years. He didn't tell me why he left it, only that he'd never wear it again." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Some things aren't meant to be worn." I laughed it off, assuming it was some old superstition or her way of making the mask seem more mysterious. The price was right, and I thought it'd make the perfect addition to my costume, so I ignored her warning and bought it. I barely made it out of the shop before I felt a strange, almost electric sensation in my hands, but I shrugged it off as excitement. Later that night, as I got ready for a Halloween party, I pulled the mask from its bag and stared at it. Up close, it looked even creepier, the smile almost seeming to curve wider, like it was waiting for me. Taking a deep breath, I slipped it over my face. As soon as the mask touched my skin, a cold shiver raced down my spine. My face tingled as if the mask were alive, molding itself to me. My vision blurred for a moment, and for just a split second, I could have sworn I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me in the mirror. I blinked, but when I looked again, the shadow was gone. Shrugging it off as a trick of the light, I tried to adjust the mask, but it seemed tighter than before. I tugged at it gently, but it didn't budge, pressing against my face like it was trying to become part of me. I leaned closer to the mirror and felt my heart skip a beat. My eyes looked different. Darker, almost hollow. And the twisted smile on the mask seemed disturbingly real, as if my own face had adopted the grin. I brushed it off, figuring it was just the mood I was getting into for Halloween. But as I walked into the party, something strange happened. People avoided me, their laughter dying down as I passed. Some of my friends looked at me with shock, and one of them even muttered, Is he serious with that?" Confused, I tried to make conversation, but every time I spoke, people backed away, glancing at me with discomfort. It was like the mask had a life of its own, exuding an aura that unsettled everyone around me. I felt an icy dread settle over me, but I tried to ignore it. After an hour, though, I'd had enough. I decided to take the mask off. I found a bathroom, locked the door, and tugged at the mask, expecting it to come off easily. But it didn't move. My fingers scrambled along the edges, pressing harder, digging in, trying to find a gap. Panic surged as I pulled, but it felt like it had fused to my skin, molding over my features in a way I couldn't explain. I looked up in the mirror, and that's when my heart stopped. The mask's grin was gone, but my own face was twisted into the same eerie smile. My lips were stretched back unnaturally, a grotesque expression that didn't belong to me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My reflection showed only that twisted grin, eyes wide with terror but locked in that smile. With growing horror, I pulled harder, my skin burning as I tried to peel the mask away, but it was no use. The mask wasn't there, it was me. My own face had somehow become that twisted, horrifying grin. I stumbled back, my breath shallow, as I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But every time I looked in the mirror, the same expression stared back, as though something else was looking through my eyes, controlling my face. I clawed at my mouth, desperate to move my lips, my cheeks, to shift that monstrous grin. But my face was frozen, locked in a horrifying smile, my screams silenced. And as I backed away from the mirror, I noticed something in the shadows, a faint figure, standing just behind me, watching. It was the man from the mask's memory, his face blank, but his eyes, they gleamed with satisfaction.